Welcome to Module 3. In Module 3, we're going to discuss a little bit about crowdfunding new builds as well as existing builds versus construction. Now, when we talk about a new build, I'm just going to walk you through the process a little bit. So, when it comes to real estate investing, you have what we call new builds. New builds are basically purchasing land and then building on top of the land, whether it's a condominium, whether it's a multifamily apartment building, whether it is a brand new hotel or an apartment block or anything like that. In regards to new builds, there's a certain process and time that they go through in order for you to materialize the actual profit from that project. So a new contractor, a developer, or anyone like that comes along, most of the real estate style tokens focus on this core aspect, which is tokenizing or crowdfunding for a new build. Now, new builds, they basically take around 2 to 3 years for the actual construction to be completed, for the new build to be built, and for the sales process to kick in so that you can materialize your profit that's generated from it. Now, new builds, the average yield is about 10%. So if it's a $100 million building, you're looking at 10%, which is the average yield that is generated off that building. And the reason, some may ask that why is it so low? And the reason is because there's multiple different things that you have to focus on when it comes to a new build, especially if it's a high-rise tower or something like that. You have the project, you have the contractor, and then you have basically subcontractors who deal with multiple different aspects of the building process. You have your mechanical, your engineering, your plumbing, you have your carpenters, block masons, you have your steel fitters, you have different people who work on that project at one time. And what happens is if they don't work in harmony, if they're not getting things done on time and on budget, which is very rare for a high-rise tower, then you fall into what we call delays. And delays eat up your profit margins inside of a new build, inside of a new project. So the average yield is about 10%, but this can shrink very low. I've had a personal friend of mine who invested all his money into a high-rise tower and he made no money at all because the cost of the project was way over time, way over budget, multiple delays, and he was dealing with 7, 8 different subcontractors for the different aspects of the building process. And again, subcontractors were not getting things done on time. If you can't go through one phase, you can't get to another. This is not like where you can jump phases and go to something else. In construction, everything has to be done in one complete phase in order to jump to the next phase. And so new builds generally take 2 to 3 years for your profits to be materialized. And then on top of that, you have what we call existing builds. Existing builds, the process is 1 to 2 years, and the average yield is 6 to 8%. Existing builds, what a lot of real estate style tokens also do is they crowdfund the profits and the funds needed for you to actually go and purchase an existing property. Then they will do what we call a refit out. They'll do a rebuild. They'll go through the entire project, they'll refurbish it, they'll change some of the bedding, the equipment, the furniture, the lighting, the fixtures, different things like that. Maybe they'll improve the bathroom and the kitchen, and maybe they'll improve the living space, or if it's a hotel, they'll improve the carpets, the curtains, and the furniture inside the hotel. And then they're able to charge a slightly higher a profit per room. So if you have 50 rooms to 100 rooms in your hotel and you go through a full refurbish, and now the rooms can actually fetch more price for the actual same room that was previously rented. So the profit ranges from 6 to 8%. Now this can go up, this can go down. Again, when it comes to refurbishing, it takes time in order for you to refurbish the existing project. There's also existing projects that you can buy and take over right away and manage better. You have a better efficient process for managing. Maybe you subcontract out the management part to a reputable company like a well-known hotel brand, which is what happens in a lot of cases. And the hotel brand then actually goes along and manages the property better. They have higher occupancy rates. They do better in seasonal times. They have existing clientele that they piggyback onto the new project into renting the property. They have loyalty and rewards programs and different things like that that actually allow you to fetch a higher price, or maybe the same price, but it decrease your cost and increase your profits because the occupancy is higher and you're booking it more frequently. Sometimes these existing builds, they deal with what we call booking engines. This is your Orbitz, your Expedia, your Priceline, your Booking.com. But these booking engines generally take a percentage on the rooms that they book, the clients that book through them. And so you have a profit sharing that happens, and the average room profit that they make on the actual room that they rent through the booking engines sometimes decreases in profit because they do it, if my rooms are not rented, I need some additional occupancy rate to be higher, then I'll deal with some of these booking engines. A lot of people these days, they use booking engines to actually book their hotels. They don't go directly to the website because sometimes the price is higher. And so when it comes to new builds, existing builds, 1 to 2 years, 6 to 8% average yield. Now let's talk about construction. You have your new builds, which is 2 to 3 years time frame, 10% roughly on the yield. You have your existing properties, which is 1 to 2 years in terms of the process of getting it profitable, but you have also 6 to 8% in the yield. Now let's talk about construction. And the reason construction is so profitable is because the first money that goes into the actual construction. There's 3 parts to this process. There is the acquisition and the purchase of the land. There is the construction. And then finally, there is the sales and the profit generation and the hotel renting or the property renting or leasing, whatever you want to call it, that generates a cash flow for the project. So when it comes to construction, the time frame depending on the project. If you're doing a high-rise tower, again, there's a lot of time, maybe 2 to 3 years that just goes into the construction, maybe 2 years that goes into the construction. Then there's for the general projects, like what we're talking about is low-rise buildings, villa projects. We personally stay away from high-rise towers. We want to mitigate and minimize as much risk as possible. And so when you're dealing with multiple different subcontractors, there's more risks involved. There's more construction delays involved. There's more cost overruns involved. And so when you're dealing with a smaller project, you have a smaller crew working on that project consistently. It's the same people working from beginning until end of the project. There's not a lot of subcontracting going on. So you can decrease the actual cost. You can get things done on time and on budget. And in some rare cases, if the expertise is really well and the skilled labor is really good and they're working in harmony, you can get this stuff done even faster than the budget allotted, and you can get this done faster than the time allotted, which again increases your efficiency and increases your profits. So general construction projects like a villa, a small house, a 2-bedroom house, a 2-story house, or some plot of land that you want to develop whatever your dream home is on. That generally is in the construction niche, and it goes from 8 to 12 months, and the profit is 20 to 25% average yield. And the reason is because the phases of development, you basically get paid for these phases of development. And I'll give you a small example. Let's say I have a new property that I'm developing. I've just purchased the land. I go to an architect consultant and I say, this is my dream property. I want you to build me my dream home. He does the drawings. Then he takes it to the municipality and he gets the permits and approvals for building. Then he goes to a contracting company, as an example, ours, and he says, put in a bid or a tender on this project. And then the contracting company submits a bid. Once the bid is accepted and the deal is done, then the permits are already in place. The contracting company begins the work right away. Soon as they begin the work happens in multiple phases. And we're going to explain in some later parts of this series exactly how the building and construction process works, so you have some clear education on it, as well as how the profit is generated and what the average costs are per project. That's where we can then explain the efficiency, the skilled labor, and things like that that will reduce the costs, reduce the time frame, and increase the profit. So construction projects is Habibi Coin's bread and butter. This is our core area of business that we focus on. And there's many factors and reasons that we're going to explain over time that will allow you to understand why we're so confident about this process and why we're so excited to educate you on this process so that you can see why our business model is such an efficient business model and will generate great profits and returns. Now, construction, 8 to 12 months, 20 to 25% return. The cost in order to build a villa or a home is much lower than the cost to build a high-rise tower or a multifamily apartment building. Yes, the income is less, because when you're cash flowing it or leasing it out, or you're even selling it, there's multiple streams of income there, and they're for a sustainable period of time. But the cost going in is much higher. In a construction project, the cost going in is much lower, the turnaround time is much lower, the risk is much lower, and the profit margin is much higher. So if you're doing construction projects in volume, you end up generating a lot more profit than if you were doing new builds, or you were doing existing builds and refurbishing or rehabbing and then actually leasing or renting. So this is why we chose specifically the construction model, in addition to the fact that we have a lot of experience in this field and a lot of experience having completed multiple different projects. We're going to explain more as we go along, but just before I get there, I'm actually going to touch on two more points. And one is, what makes a new build or an existing real estate investment profitable? Now, there's multiple different types of people or groups or entities that would actually invest into this type of project. You have your average individual, you have your real estate a group, or you have a bunch of friends, or maybe a company. The core focus is to develop new builds or existing builds. And then there's your REITs, real estate investment trusts. Now, real estate investment trusts have a lot more cash on hand and in the bank in order to do bigger projects. They also generally have a lot more systems and processes compared to the average individual. And so real estate investment trusts perform much better than any other type of comparable group or individual. And so real estate investment trusts, they generally don't invest into just one place. They're global, or they're countrywide. They invest into multiple different areas, state to state, province to province, city to city, and they invest into clusters or certain areas that they generate them the greatest returns that they can generate. Real estate investment trusts, generally what they do is they pool capital together. Multiple different people are invested into the actual entity that manages it, and then they have what they call a management company that deploys the capital into the investments. A lot of times, a real estate investment trust is created through people who have actual real-world expertise and real-world track records when it comes to investing into real estate. When it comes to an individual, they may have one or two properties. They may have multiple properties. But again, they're one individual compared to a group. And the group generally has more expertise combined, and they end up generally doing a lot better, and they're more profitable. So when it comes to a performance or a return on real estate investing, REITs are generally the best things that produce great returns for everybody out there. So if you're investing into the real estate space, you can do it by yourself, you can do it with a couple of friends, or maybe do it yourself with some subcontractors, or you can invest into a real estate investment trust, and they generally have the highest production in terms of profits. So a real estate investment trust will on average produce 10% or higher. 10% or higher. I have seen in some cases real estate investment trusts do 12%, 15%, in some rare cases 20%. They have a lot more experience going in. They know what they're doing. So they only pick and choose very selectively the properties that they know that they can turn around or generate a great profit in. Now, let's compare that to construction. Construction, you have what we call a CIT. Now, this is a phrase that has been coined by HabibiCoin. This is our team here that has generally coined this phrase, so you won't hear it in many other places. But we call it a CIT. A CIT is a construction investment trust. Now, this is people who get together and invest into creating a massive construction operation. It's a trust where money is managed and people are investing into it. It's a collective because everybody's combined into their efforts into doing it, but it also leverages all the different aspects like expertise, field work, skilled labor, the ability to get projects done on time through relationships that they have in the construction field itself. Now, if you're getting more projects, you're doing construction on a bunch of projects, and it's being done as a construction investment trust, the returns could be much higher than you would make in a REIT, because the first money that goes in, other than the land purchase, the first money that goes into the construction. Remember, we just discussed land and acquisition and purchase. We discussed construction, and then sales and monetization of the structure that is being built. So now, Construction investment trusts can generate anywhere from 15 to 20% or higher on an annual basis, and in some cases, every 8-9 months, depending on what type of projects they're building, how much in volume they're building those projects, and how that's comparable to what the time frame it takes to build another project or a bigger project. Now, construction investment trusts can also focus on specific areas of expertise. For instance, in our case, we focus on villa projects. We focus on projects that are a lot easier to execute, make more money, and we focus on low-rise buildings. Low-rise buildings, again, there's less subcontractors working on the job. If you have enough skilled labor, it could be all your own labor working on that project, and you can get it done in a faster time. Compared to a high-rise building and a low-rise buildings have much less risk, and the turnaround time could be much faster. So we focus with HabibiCoin on creating what we call our construction investment trust. Now, this CIT, if managed really well, managed with great efficiency, it can be very, very profitable. Now, in this case, I'm also going to share one simple thing with you. If I'm doing one project, okay, I'm doing one new build, one existing refurbish, or I'm doing one investment, then my costs are generally a fixed cost. They're higher. If I'm doing multiple construction projects, my cost actually goes down. You know, I know most people will think that generally if you're doing more projects, the cost should be higher. It's actually the reverse, because there's more efficiencies in the system and process, and those efficiencies allow you to cut expenses, especially your fixed expenses may be fixed, but you can cut them by creating better infrastructure, simpler systems and processes, and a really efficient management system in order to complete things on time and on budget. So we're going to dive into a little bit more details about the construction process and what a CIT generally can do for you as an investor or someone who's partaking in it.